Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is an athlete that I personally put on K2. Amie Engerbretson pretty much made me put her on the K2 program. She's a go-getter who had it in her mind that she was going to be a pro skier, not just a ski model. And while I may have thought that Amie was destined for a career that was more about modeling than skiing, boy was I wrong, and she is still killing it for K2. Speaking of K2, I do need to talk about them for a few minutes. As most of you know, I worked there for 16 years, and the brand and what it meant will always have a special place in my heart. So when I was told that there was a K2 reunion for Vachon employees at the old factory, I was psyched to go back to the old building, see old friends, and relive some memories. The reunion did not disappoint. First of all, it was put on by the Weed family, so thanks to Mike and Terry Weed for twisting this one up. I rolled up to Vachon with good friends and former K2ers Ben Wallace and Matt O'Loughlin. And when I say we rolled up, we kept it Vachon, and we walked on to the ferry boat and hitchhiked up to K2. That ride was a story in itself, but I'm not going to talk about the down-on-his-luck 60-plus dude who jumped in the back of the pickup truck with us with a bag of cigarettes and candy. While he was fun to chat with, and he was also a former K2 employee who did a year at the plant in 1971, it was a pretty sad situation. And today was all about not feeling sad. So we got dropped off at 19215 Vachon Highway Southwest. From there, we were all flooded with amazing memories that only a dilapidated, black mold-infested building combined with a lot of old friends can bring back. There were employees there from the inaugural year in 1962, all the way to a few folks that still work there today. And I was talking to one of them, and I mentioned that I get listeners' email every once in a while asking me why I seem kind of bummed on K2. And I always say that I'm not bummed on the brand, it's just a different brand today. The brand doesn't hang its hat on its history like it did up until about 10 years ago. And I thought it was crazy to abandon that. But in talking to that current employee, it sounds like the mantra from the current leadership there is more the thinking that just because you knew who we were doesn't mean you know who we are now or who we need to be. Or something to that effect. And you know what? It's working for them. While I'm an Elan guy who likes European-built skis, I respect the shit out of what they are building over at K2. I mean, really, it's a brand that has been bought and sold and had so many rounds of layoffs over the years. It was scary to be there, but now it looks like things have stabilized, and things are doing well. And while it's different, it's not the same red, white, and blue K2 that I know. That's okay, because times change. But whatever. I went, and it was awesome to see so many great people. So that's what's been going on in my life, and that actually happened a couple of weeks ago, when I recorded this intro, because at the moment, I should be on a plane home from Maui, and most likely I'll talk about that next week. But before we get into Amie Engerbretson, did I just say that? Sorry, Todd. Before we get into your girlfriend, I need to ask listeners to do a few things for me. The first is follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. I posted a bunch of K2 photos from the old building, and they are worth checking out. I also want to ask you to tell people about the show and support the amazing folks who make the show happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Alpine Vans, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. Now, let's talk to Amie Engerbretson. Your life and time to think it's going to be pretty easy, and we'll just start it here, and I like to break the ice a little bit. And breaking the ice with you, we have a history and a lot of shared experiences, so I'll start with, your career started with getting exposure in magazines, it seemed like. And the most important magazine back then, when you were coming up, was Powder Magazine. Is it true that one of your life goals was to get that elusive Powder Magazine cover?
I mean, you say was. I still have the hope that that is one of my life goals.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, that's still completely a major, major goal of mine. And I hope that there's some magic of the universe that will make that a goal that can still be sought. I have no idea what the state of powder is. I don't have any insider knowledge or anything. I have no idea what's going on. They're still on Instagram, so I'm still thinking there's a chance.
Yeah, there's definitely a chance. And with them, though, were you able to get a lot of shots published within the magazine, at least within the pages?
Yeah, I got quite a bit published in powder. I mean, never as much as I wanted, but I had like a couple gallery photos. I got like a little athlete profile. I had a bunch of ads in there. So yeah, I got some photos published in powder, but I definitely wanted more and more and more. You know, I love getting photos published and people that are out shooting with me. It's kind of funny because I'm always like, I'm here for covers, you know? I'm like
Yep.
kind of joking, but not really. But like powder's kind of always the top notch there, but I definitely probably had more published in other magazines. The word on the street is that Dave Reddick doesn't like smilers, and I'm a big smiler. Like, I can't help it. So I need to stop smiling if I want to get my cover of Powder.
And you know what's funny is I guess you didn't get any special treatment, but at one point I think you dated someone who was an editor at Powder. So you would think that maybe dating an editor at Powder, you might get some inside information on how to get those covers, or you're able to meet with Reddick and talk to him and get some extra info that other people aren't able to get, but it never worked out for you. But you're one of those people that's always trying to get that extra beta and making sure that you're calculating what you're doing. And back then, were you going out and having beers with the Powder crew and trying to figure out how to put yourself on that cover?
I mean, I think that I dated Mike Rogie for a couple years back when he was managing editor of Powder. And I even lived down in SoCal with him for a handful of months. I almost think that maybe hurt my chances of getting in the mag rather than helped, because I think I was seen as like Rogie's girlfriend, not like my own independent skier.
Yep.
So I don't think that, certainly it didn't help me in any way. And I don't think I was strategic about like trying to get in the magazine in that time, but I did get to know Reddick and became friends with him. And another piece of that that's actually even more strategic is my dad's a photographer, and I handle all of his processing, submissions, everything like that, like all of his invoicing and all of that kind of stuff. So it was more like getting inside Reddick's brain to try to figure out how to sell him photos. And of course, some of those photos are going to be me, which would be great. But like, it's more the strategy that way was kind of more my kind of MO than like, how do I get Powder to put me on the cover? It was more just like, how do I learn how this industry works, you know? And I guess I did get to know people at Powder better via Mike, but I think that I probably would have gotten to know them either way, just because I'm kind of pushy and don't take no for an answer, and anybody else that's worked with me knows that. Boyfriend or no.
Well, I think, we've definitely had opinions on the magazine that we've shared, because like yourself, I love Powder. But over the years, I feel like almost since Derek Taylor left, the magazine's gotten a little bit different. They stopped building maybe the heroes around skiers and stopped telling stories about skiers going skiing in the pros and made it more about themselves doing things. That was my kind of take on it all. But I know we've had discussions on it. And what issues did you see with Powder towards the end that you weren't stoked on, if there were any?
Yeah, I mean, I say this with respect that everybody's worked at Powder along the way, but I definitely saw it kind of losing its soul in skiing. And then I feel like there's a lot of people at Powder that wanted Powder to be more than a ski magazine for skiers. And fundamentally, that's what it is and what people loved about it. And I remember having like this kind of joking, kind of not joking theory that like Powder hated pro skiers. And I was like starting to earmark every page of the magazine where they bash on pro skiers. And I don't know what's that about. I think it's easy to be like, oh, these pro skiers, they just have these magical lives. And I don't know, think we're not maybe worth anything. But, the fact of the matter is it's hard to get a great ski shot. And I think that regardless of like where the soul and the message of Powder went, like having Reddick there kind of always kept that high echelon of photography there. And, I was always in it for the photos. Of course, I read the magazine as I got like older and more involved in the industry. But like, honestly, like Powder for me was always about the photos. But I still have hundreds of Powder magazines in my house now, from when I was a kid and back when my dad was getting like published in Powder all the time. And so I think it's important to tackle issues, but I think it is okay just to be a ski magazine for skiers. Like that is enough, you don't need to be the New Yorker of skiing or whatever. Like I was just losing a little bit of like what I enjoyed in the magazine, I think. And I think that it's hard to please everybody. So it's a big job, but like I think that being a ski magazine is enough because a lot of people freaking love it,
Yeah, that's what people want when they buy Powder, is a ski magazine, and they lost their way a little bit. And really, when you look at everything, the print landscape has totally changed from when you started, because in the beginning of your career, it was all about getting with photographers or your dad, going out and shooting photos. They're pitching these photos to the magazines or submitting them, and hopefully they're getting published. But as we've seen a lot of these magazines fold, and print, while there is a boutique print revival out there, Mountain Gazette's out there, which is great, but there aren't the outlets to get your shots published anymore like there used to be. So do you find it that your career now is going out less in the backcountry, or going out less with photographers and more focusing on film, because even if you get the photos, there's no place for them to go?
I mean, kind of. I think it's a natural progression of a career to always kind of want to get more into filming, right? Like no matter what avenue we take, whether like a lot of athletes compete or whatever and then try to get into filming. I got my foot in the door in the industry through photos. I remember I sent you, Mike Powell, my first ever cover and I said, please give me skis. You're like, okay. And I'm still at K2 thanks to that. But I think that there are still needs for photos out there. And I think a lot of what we're seeing is it's not even just like focusing on filming. It's like trying to get a gram instead of like trying to get a cover. You're trying to get a gram, which is like pretty dumb, really, when it comes down to it, that like our lives have been boiled down to that. And I think for me, I, for some reason, really love shooting photos. And I think that that's like not something a lot of athletes actually enjoy. They see it as kind of like a bore or slow paced or like the have to of the job, not the want to. And
Sure.
that puts me in a unique position. Like I literally love photo days, whether I'm with my dad or any number of photographers that I love working with. I love how much effort it takes to like go from zero to like a published photo. Like it's the hardest thing to do. And how many photos we shoot and how much arguing and snowballs and crashes like go into it. Like I still think it's really fun and I think it's a creative endeavor and it takes a lot of like teamwork and I still really like the challenge. I still make it a big focus of my winter, even if instead of potentially being able to get one of 8 covers a year, now I can only get like one of 4. Still cover, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's still like something that's my lifeblood kind of a little bit. It's always in the background. And I definitely have been getting into filming more for a long time. And now even more recently, just like kind of doing what everyone does and making my own projects and whatnot. And I'm really focused on that too. But it's twofold. I love shooting photos, but I also know it's like something that's very valuable about me as a skier to my brand. So I want to keep that alive, knowing that that's like a piece of me that's a big asset to the brands that support me, you know?
It's bread and butter with you. It's like, hey, we need a photo of this. Oh, we'll just call Amie and get it. Amie, can you go shoot? You're like, yeah. And they know that the photo's guaranteed to happen and it's going to be a good one. So it's always an easy thing to work with.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah.
Put a lot of hard work into it. But yeah, it's more just I was in like a ski model like training camp since I was basically born with my dad. So while a lot of skiers have like 10 years experience shooting photos, I've got like 30 plus. So I've got an advantage.
And your dad, he was a pro skier. But before he became a pro skier, I think he was like a dirtbag skier from Idaho who happened to see Schmidt and Plake and was like, I'm moving to Squaw Valley and I'm skiing like those guys. Is that kind of like the hot dog mentality of your dad?
I mean, my dad's story is basically the story of Hot Dog. I just think there was a lot less like naked women and partying, and he like accidentally got a kid out of the deal. So it's like the realistic Hot Dog. But yeah, he dropped out of college in Northern Idaho, moved to Squaw to compete on the mogul circuit, and tried to get in the crew with like Schmidt and Tom Day and Treeman, and had a really successful career as a professional skier. And that looked super different back in the 90s, you know? And I think it was really hard to be a pro skier and have a baby. Like I can't imagine doing the last 10 years of my career while also raising what would now be like 13 when my dad was my age. So like that would have changed my life quite a bit. But he was actually sponsored by K2 for like 12 years. I think he was kind of like pre-ish your time, but then he became a photographer. And so like when I was young, he was kind of still skiing in front of the camera, so they'd always need like the family photos. So we'd like do our ski modeling and our one pieces in. Like back then, you always had to wear a white turtleneck under your ski jacket with it unzipped, with your goggles backwards around your neck, sunglasses, hair down. Like they never wanted you wearing a helmet. Like it was a whole thing. And then, you know, as I got older, my dad transitioned to being an actual shooter, and so that's just like in my blood, basically, to be a term I actually don't like, ski model, but I know that I'm basically the only person that has a derogatory association with that term.
Caroline Gleick does as well.
Yeah.
But you two are very similar in the fact that when you guys came to me, you know, I mean, you kind of came to me, but you came to K2, but I was your contact there. Both of you had aspirations of becoming this pro skier dude, and both of you didn't have the experience to do anything but shoot photos at that point. And it was kind of like, hey, give me this opportunity to go on trips and get that experience and earn respect, and I will get you every photo, every billboard, everything you could possibly want. And when I look at both of your careers, it kind of worked out for both of you, where just the tenacity that both of you had, who looked at it as a business and was like, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to take all these steps to get sponsored. And the way you did it, it's a textbook way that people could look at and say hard work pays off, because you never rested. Like you said, you never took no for an answer. And getting back into your story, though, and saying it was your destiny to be where you are, it's like you were born in a cookie shop. I think you were in the Wildflower when your mom's water broke or she goes into labor or something like that. And that's just like the perfect Squaw Valley story, right? Like you being born at the Wildflower. Was it right next to the chocolate chips?
Yeah, I just got shot right out into like a big vat of cookie dough.
Perfect.
No, my mom's water did break at the cookie shop. We made it to the hospital, though. Like, luckily, it wasn't too far away. And my mom was a fantastic skier, too. She had a car accident when I was younger and didn't ski much in my life, but she grew up at squaw racing. And it's kind of interesting. A couple of her ski coaches have actually recognized me as Nancy Schlarman's daughter by the way I ski, even though because of my mom's accident, we didn't actually ever ski together very much. So there's something genetic there. But yeah, I mean, I think that my path to becoming a pro skier, yes, came from like a photo background, which wasn't like the story du jour or still isn't. But I came on the scene at a weird time in the comp world. The Free Skiing World Tour was getting eaten up by the Free Ride World Tour. And it was kind of like a weird couple lag years there where they hadn't really started up the multi-star stops. And it wasn't this like fun thing that the athletes a little bit earlier in the scene before me like participated in. But I had this skill of photos, and what I think a lot of people don't realize, like being like a ski model or shooting photos maybe is seen as like kind of soft or fluffy, but nothing tells the truth about your technique and your ability as a skier like a photo does. And what people realize is that like if you can have a high success rate at knocking out great photos, chances are you're a friggin' really good skier. So all the other things involved with being a pro skier will come as you get experience. And I think that that's what I've been able to kind of show. And I say my job is about so much more than just skiing. Like if I just wanted to ski all the time and be a skier, like that's a hobby. Like my job is creating something to then share with people, to then affect a thought, a mood, an inspiration, to then have them go do something. Like my job is a creator. Like I always like to say I have more in common with like an artist than an NFL player. And so I think like that attitude that I've had, that like it is work, but the actual work of skiing I love just as much as I actually just love skiing, is why I think I've been able to make this career way more successful than I ever thought possible when I was sending you like scared emails, 10 years ago, like, oh my God, I hope he says yes.
Well, there are all these steps that you needed to take, and we're going to talk about them, but it seems like you're still taking them. It's like you started at the bottom. I mean, you were a 22-year-old who said, Dad, I think I'm going to try this pro ski thing, but you hadn't been a skier in a while. You were more in school, so nobody does that, and it's a crazy situation that you're able to make that happen. But crazy situations, and speaking about that, this is where my timeline gets a little muddy, but when did your parents split up?
Young. I was about a year and a half old.
Okay, so do you have a relationship at all with your mom? Because that's something I never really heard of in our time together working, is you never really mentioned her much.
I have a fairly strained relationship with my mom, but we do keep in touch. And because of our history, I've set boundaries. And, I think that my dad has been a bigger part of my story to who I am. And to this day, I'm very close with him. He's like my very best friend, favorite ski partner, love working with him. And I think that there's just parts of growing up, it was a strained childhood, it was divorce and all kinds of, mental health issues going on. And it was really tough for a long time. And so I think those in the squaw community that saw that know that about me. But I think that I just take it and go a positive note and say like, hey, I don't have this great relationship with my mom, but I do have this great relationship with my dad. And I came out of the whole thing a pretty whole human and grateful for that. So I think that's kind of why I guess I keep the narrative in that direction. But my mom was a ripping skier. So that's one thing that's cool.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and the 10 Barrel Brewery has done so much for action sports since they started brewing the Northwest's best beer in 2006. But what they've just done is truly game-changing. They've introduced a new German-inspired Pilsner to their lineup, and while Profuse Juice used to be my favorite, I love this Pilsner and will be drinking a lot of it this summer. It's light, refreshing, crisp, clean, and it has an aftertaste that I can't quite put my finger on, but it reminds me of drinking beer in my 20s, and that's awesome. It's tasty, it's nostalgic, and it's what you should try next time you're at the store. You can find out more about 10 Barrel, their events, their athletes, and the all-new Pilsner over at 10barrel.com. My next sponsor is Alpine Vans. They are the brand that Cody Townsend trusted to build his vehicle for the 50 project. And Cody now has an edit out on that build, and it's 14 minutes of awesomeness, and it really shows you why going with Alpine Vans on your Sprinter buy and build will be the best choice you make for your adventures, period. Cody's build is so sick, and every detail was thought of. And why is that? That's because the guys at Alpine know the features you need to live comfortably without sacrificing anything, because they know adventure life firsthand. From living at the ski resort to bike trips to surf, Alpine has lived it and knows what it takes to make your vehicle a functional home. And even with this electronics shortage, where it's hard to get your hands on a Sprinter, Alpine has an inventory of 8 vehicles ready to turn into your dream adventure mobile. I encourage you to head over to alpinevans.com and check out their impressive quote builder, which asks you the right questions to make sure your build is both what you need and what you want. My final sponsor is Stanley. And if you aren't ready for your camping, hiking, and general outdoor adventure needs yet, it's time to get on it. And you and yours deserve the best stuff out there. And Stanley has been setting the industry standard of innovation and quality and getting you out there since 1913. By listening to the Powell Movement, you're going to get the best deal you'll find on all Stanley products anywhere. It's through this podcast. I'll get you 30% off everything Stanley. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and use the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get that deal. Spend over $100 and I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. So please support the folks at Stanley and make sure you're dialed in for the summer. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So you have this super loving dad who'll do anything for his kid, but really, what the hell does your dad know about being a parent? It seems like he's a ski bum skiing moguls and all of a sudden he's got a baby. Is he pretty much figuring it all out by the seat of his pants?
Oh yeah, I mean he still is a ski bum figuring it out by the seat of his pants. So my dad was 21 when I was born, quickly turned 22 right after. So he was a child. And like at the beginning, he was working like triple shifts as a janitor at Squaw to try to get a pass. And, you know, he did everything. And it's pretty crazy to think of like what he gave up for me just to exist as a human for sure. But then also to like make a life in Tahoe work for us, you know, and he still to this day runs a tree service in the summers. So he cuts down trees like an arborist.
Yep.
He's been doing that my whole life. That's kind of like his summer gig to support the winter gig, although he could have his entire career be a cinematographer and photographer. He just, I think, actually really likes cutting down trees and the physicalness of it. And I had a weird, you know, I always loved skiing and I was always super into it. I hated racing, like from the get-go, from day one. I just had no interest.
But they threw you in a program, right?
Oh, yeah. I was a Mighty Mite the whole time. And I even did the first couple years of like the race program, the J program. And I just didn't care about skiing in the gates, you know? Like, I think if they had like big mountain programs back then, maybe I would have gravitated towards that. But I just didn't care about racing. I just wanted to ski KT with my dad. And I actually, at about 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, you know, I was always really, really into dance too. Like that was like my second obsession. And you get to the age where it's like, okay, skiing's getting pretty serious or dance is getting pretty serious. And I actually chose dance as like my main deal. And I danced on Tahoe till I was 22. I danced with a bunch of companies in high school and college. And I still was always like skiing throughout. But like you say, like I wasn't like trying to be a pro skier when I was a teenager. I was trying to be a professional dancer.
Well, it seems like there's more of a future in dance. And knowing you probably, I would think that you kind of looked at the different futures that you could have being a skier or being a dancer. And there's really no future for you at that point, especially in being a skier, really. But dance, the whole world's your oyster, and you're really good at it.
Yeah, I maybe it was part of that, but I almost think it was some sort of weird masochistic thing where, like, I had a lot of natural talent as a skier that it was innate and I was just born with it, where with dance, I had everything wrong. I had the wrong lines. I didn't have good feet. I had bad turnout. I didn't have the right body shape. Like, all the things I had stacked against me with dance. So it was almost like I wanted to like prove something to myself. It's funny. I started out college at University of Arizona. I got a scholarship there, but it was for academics. And I really wanted to get into the dance program. And I auditioned for the dance school at University of Arizona 8 times. And I got 8 rejection letters.
No way. That does not, I mean, it sounds like you doing it 8 times, but actually not making your goal. Was it just soul crushing and that's why you transfer?
Yeah, well, I transferred because I didn't really love the School of Arizona, and I ended up transferring to Columbia College in Chicago, where I studied media management and studied stuff I cared about a lot. Like my other kind of obsession is all things producing and production, which is cool because that's basically exactly what I do. But yeah, I think it was just one of those moments where like I think any high school athlete goes through that time where like to actually make it outside of your bubble of success as a high schooler, especially in a small town. You know, I think anybody that played high school sports with any sort of passion can relate to that moment when you're like So here's the point where just working harder than everybody and having more passion than everybody ends, because that girl also works harder than everybody, has more passion than everybody, but also has the lines, the turnout, the feet, all that stuff. And you're just like, well, okay, what now? And I wish I still danced a lot. I still dance like for fun. I have this like actually dance incorporated project going with Sweetgrass this year. So I've been like going Western dancing a lot lately. Like on Saturday night, I was down line dancing and swing dancing at this really weird bar in Sparks, Reno, Sparks, Nevada. So I don't dance in any sort of like
Stage 4?
Yeah. I don't dance in like a specific way anymore, but I think being a dancer was huge for the athlete I am. And I still, when I think of the kind of skier that I'm trying to be, it's all about like grace and touch and technique. And I think so much of that actually comes from being a dancer. So it wasn't all for nothing, but I certainly, I wasn't on the development team of anywhere. I bashed gates until I was, I did it enough to like get some technique, but I don't have that same ski fostering story. And I always was skiing and I was always shooting photos, even all the way through high school and even in college. I'd come back every chance I got. It's just like I was just doing it because it was like walking to me. It wasn't like this thing I was trying to make a career until all of a sudden I just decided to give it a whirl.
It's like you come home from school and your dad's like, hey, you want to go out and shoot some photos? And it's just a day with your dad and that's cool.
Yeah, totally. I never did any sort of like quintessential college spring break trips. And I think for me, I grew up in a small town. I didn't know what I had growing up in Tahoe until I moved to other places. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And I think that was that coming out of the mountains made me realize that was so much about who I was. And I would go home every chance I got and shoot with my dad and ski. And then it was like 6 months before graduation. I really didn't have a plan. And I called my dad and I was like, hey, like, I think I know what I want to do when I graduate. And I was like, I think I'll move home and move back in with you and maybe like try to do a couple comps next year and get sponsored and maybe we can like shoot and stuff. And I have probably like the only parent in the planet that would be like psyched to hear the news that after graduating from college, your kid wants to move home and be a ski bum. But, that was like probably like the best day of my dad's life,
Yeah. So it's like you have an epiphany.
Yeah, kind of. And I was like, well, I'm really good at this and I like it and I miss it desperately now that I don't have it in my life. So why don't I try it and see, A, if I actually am good enough? Because like that's always the question, right? Like, can I actually, even being a kid, not knowing I was like always aspiring to be a pro skier, but like, watching the movies, like, do you think I could do that? Like, could I do that? What would I do if I was in that position, standing on top of that line,
Yeah.
And I think I'm still searching out the answers to those questions now.
Well, the odds were totally against you. I mean, if you look at your ski career, especially at that point, it's not like you're an Angel Collinson or anything like that at that point, given I don't know where she is in her career at that point in your life, but that's not your style of skiing at that point. And even if it was, you weren't like a known entity in that world. Do you realize in your head that like, hey, I can get there. I just have to do this differently than most. And is there like a full-on plan in your head of how you're going to do it? Or is it just try to figure it out?
I mean, I think that growing up in Squaw with so many of my friends and family friends and everybody like in the ski industry, it didn't feel different or scary or even like I was really going out on a limb. Like I was surrounded by people with totally alternative lifestyles. So like it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was like normal in the community I come from to like try to be a pro skier. Like it's normal. And I think that I just was able to see the way other people were doing it. Because I did try a few comps and I was like spending way more money than I was even going to make if I won. And it like didn't make sense. And so I just think it was in my brain to be like, okay, well, what is my value? What is my asset? What am I good at? And how can I use that? And I think that's how I went about it. I'm like, well, it seems like I'm pretty good at taking photos. And the first year I was trying to like do that in any sort of real way, I got published a ton. And so I was like, well, maybe this is valuable. And at the time with where the comps were at, I think that brands saw value in the fact that I had the skill and I was getting published over podiuming at these comps that nobody was paying attention to at the time. And they were in a weird stage because I would find I'd get support from sponsors to like go for a photo shoot, but I wouldn't get support from a sponsor to like go to a comp.
And that means they totally were looking you at as a ski model at that point, which is kind of what you were. I mean, nobody does what you did and take 4 years off completely almost, and you're shooting with your dad here and there, but nobody does that. Even the people that live in Squaw and think that they have a chance to be a pro skier. It's like they have to put their foot on the gas at all times to make that happen. And I don't know if it's genes, if it's work ethic, if it's whatever with you. I mean, you're a great skier regardless, but for you to take 4 years off in the prime of your life is crazy to think that you could just come back and be a pro skier. But with all the people around, you're saying it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. And is Salomon the first brand that believes in you and gives you some product?
Yeah, so Salomon is the first brand that gives me like flow products. The local rep gives me a free pair of skis. And then my first like sponsor box came from Sessions, actually.
Nice.
They gave me a couple like jackets and pairs of pants, and that was all happening like pre-social media too, though. This is all happening like social media was kind of starting. I think Instagram was like just starting. It's not like today where it was like this influencer thing. It was just like, yeah, whatever, we'll like give her a pair of skis and see what happens type thing, you know?
Right. When I look at Sessions at that point too, they were like a core company. They didn't have many ski models as part of their program at that point. So it had to be a good brand for you to be associated with just for street cred.
Yeah, and I don't think they treated me as a ski model. I think they saw me as someone just trying to chase down a dream and doing it slightly differently. And I think that, again, the ski model jobs were like, hey, you know, go on this photo shoot and we'll pay you a day rate or whatever, which I did get to do a couple of those with Salomon at the beginning before I was kind of like an official athlete, which at the time was great because it's still pretty cool money, you know?
Yeah.
But I think Sessions, you know, they saw it, and I don't know if it's, you know, I've always approached my job, but I don't know if it's because I saw the example of like so many people around me also having failed ski careers, like my dad included, you know. I think like I had, as much as I had an asset in my dad of like to learn how to ski for camera and all this stuff, I also saw that like he was a really, really good skier, better than most, but he wouldn't play the game. He wouldn't market himself. He didn't treat it like a business. He didn't treat himself like a brand. And that's why his ski career, not just because he had a kid, but that's why his ski career didn't maybe like get to the heights that you would think it could have based on his talent. And I'd seen so many people around me be so talented and just have it not work. And so like I knew from the beginning that like being great at skiing, like being a phenomenal skier is absolutely essential, totally crucial. But unfortunately, it's only like 30% of the mixture you need to have the career work. And I think I set out from the beginning just thinking of myself as a brand. And like I, you know, those first couple of years I went to SIA, I had like a PDF one sheet and like I had like a portfolio, and I wasn't like, hey dude, like I'm sick, like send me some stuff. You know, I would spell it out. Like I know you saw these presentations from me of like, yeah, here's what I'm doing, here's where I'm going, here are the things, you know, about me that can be an asset to your brand. I kind of just took it from that direction, I think, from the get-go. And I don't know, maybe it was just an understanding of the industry somehow that helped. I don't know.
I mean, you took your brand like I take my podcast and you were selling it. You know, it's like I call people and say, hey, I want you to sponsor this and I need this money to make this show go along. And I do it in a very professional way. And you were doing that with your ski career where most people didn't.
Especially not at that time. Like I think now athletes do that, but nobody had like an athlete deck back then.
No, and especially the best guys, the guys who really could cash in if they were smart about that stuff, they never had. They just always thought their skiing could take care of anything, which it really always didn't. And if you look at it that way, I mean, where you think skiing should be taken care of and great skiers, you're on Salomon, but they also have one of the best skiers on the planet on their program as well, Elise Sogstead, and she doesn't seem to be getting any support from them compared to a lot of the men on the program. Do you see that? And is that the reason you end up leaving Salomon? Because if they're not going to support her, what are they going to do for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, Elise became a friend and a mentor like kind of immediately. And it sure was fun when we were both on Salomon. But I definitely saw the way that they were kind of treating or valuing female athletes. And part of that was just working with people across the pond and working with an entirely French group and their different ways of communicating with women at the time. Like, you know, I don't know what's going on with Salomon's women's team now, but then it was just kind of, I felt like there were some people at the brand that like saw my potential, and then I just saw that it wasn't going anywhere. And I saw immediately like, okay, Elise has been working on this for a long time. Like I need to see what else is going on out there. And, you know, it's funny, the local rep here, he always said like, he's like, oh man, I always lose all the good athletes to everyone else, you know, like Salomon finds them and then someone else swoops them. And it's still been our joke even when I see him today. But I think that I feel pretty lucky that I got in with K2 because K2 is my second ski sponsor of my entire career, which a lot of athletes end up flip-flopping all over the place. And I haven't had to do that. So yeah, I think that it was timing at Solomon, and they weren't taking the bait, and I just was like, it's now or never.
And so when you came to K2 and I get a deck or something ends up in my hands, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember being super impressed. Like, I don't know this girl, but she's showing me 2 billboards and 3 covers and all this stuff that none of our athletes are getting right now. And we need to have someone like that who can be part of our program. And we're not one of those programs that's just going to have one woman on the team. So it was like, hey, we're not going to give you a day rate type deal, but we're going to give you a prove it year, I feel like. Because that's what I did with everyone, I feel like, at first. It's like, hey, we'll put you on. We'll give you skis. We might pay for a trip or 2. But once you start proving it, we'll start paying for more. Is that kind of how you're remembering it?
Yeah, definitely. It started out with skis, but it was way more skis. And like Solomon was giving me like 1 pair of skis. And I think you guys gave me like a bunch of pairs of skis.
Yep.
And yeah, maybe I had like $500 or something for travel or something really nominal. But it was definitely a prove it year. And I think that it was kind of cool because it was kind of the beginning of like a revamp for K2's women's team and what K2 wanted to put out forward facing with like the feminine energy of the brand, you know?
Yep.
And that's when they kind of were bringing on some of the girls I ski with a ton now, like McKenna, but you know, Lexi had already been there for a while. And I think I even remember saying like, you know, you need more women, like you need me, like you need more women. And I think it was kind of good that it happened at a time where like that was really starting to build and grow. And now where it stands, K2 as like the largest women's team of any ski brand.
I would say K2 had the largest ski team of any brand for a long, long time.
But especially the women's side.
Yeah. I mean, the women's side
Yeah.
for sure. We've always had a bunch of women on the program comparatively to other people, given it's still not an even number and it still needs to improve. But it is doing well. And when I say we, I don't work with them anymore, so I have no issue, whatever. I did help fill their women's team. I don't know who came in after my generation of K2 employees, women-wise, but whatever. We left them in a good spot in terms of athletes. But when I was your boss at K2, how was I to work with? Was I ever a pain in the ass, or were you ever like, fuck Mike Powell?
I remember you said something when I first signed. We had emailed, and then I came out to SIA, and it was the first time like actually meeting you in person. And you said something like, you're not gluten-free or something, because K2 athletes drink beer. I was like, all good. I'll drink all the beer. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's pretty par for the course for me. No major issues with me as a team manager?
I think my only issue with you as a team manager is when you left.
Yeah, well, I had to leave.
I think I've had 9 team managers since you were my TM.
That is crazy.
It's a lot. It's been a lot of turnover, but I think that there was a real magic about kind of, unfortunately, now we kind of call it the old guard of K2, and I'm really happy with the people at K2 now, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, and I think the team that's in place now has the soul back of K2 and skiing and just everything with the brand, so it is a really exciting time to be with the brand, and the skis they're making right now are outrageous. Like, I'm completely obsessed with them. But it's been some like weathering the storm to get there, and we kind of like missed the soul of the people at the brand when I first came on was so strong, you know, and it took a couple years to kind of find its way again, for sure. And so I think a lot of us like missed the soul that you and Mike and everybody, Patrick, brought to like the brand, you know?
Yeah, it was a special time.
It was pretty magical.
It's time for another sponsor break, and now that ski and snowboard season is over, Peter Glenn doesn't stop. They're the one-stop shop for all of your summer needs. You want a pair of inline skates, a wakeboard? Peter Glenn has it and has had it for over 70 years. They are a mom-and-pop group of shops that do a great job competing with the cutthroat online guys, but still offer a low-price guarantee, free shipping on orders of over $50, and a no-hassle return policy. They support a lot of great things in action sports, this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and so much more. So when you go shopping, please check out peterglenn.com to get some of the best prices and the greatest variety of products on the internet. My final sponsor is Rollerblade, and it's summertime. There's no better time to get out there and go skate than right now. Whether you find yourself using skating for fitness, skating the streets or skate parks, or heading out for marathon skate sessions, Rollerblade has the best skates on the market. I mean, these guys invented inline skating. And when they can't skate, they ski. And if you're a skier, Rollerblade also has a skate-to-ski program that they built out to get you in shape for ski season. It's the best crossover tool ever invented, and it will get your legs in much better shape than biking or running could ever do. To find out about the app, head on over to the App Store to download it, and to see the latest and greatest from Rollerblade, head on over to rollerblade.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. when I think about K2 and I think about product and I think about me having to send product to people, there was always an issue where a lot of the women would want men's skis, and we were developing women's skis, and we were putting a lot of money, time, testing, effort into it. And what do you find yourself skiing on, like percentage-wise, men's or women's skis? What are you on most of the time?
Yeah, men's skis.
Okay.
For sure. And this has been like an ongoing kind of like gripe of my career. And I'm sure you were psyched when you stopped being my team manager because you didn't have to get these emails with grumpy. Rrr. But I think, K2 had the K2 Alliance for a long time, and they still do at this moment, but they are taking some focus and shifting it also into some unisex product. And I just think that I was kind of in the heat of like the pink it and shrink it phase for the entire industry for a while there, where like women's product was just softer, less high quality product, like shorter.
Move the mounting point up.
Yeah, even when I first signed on with Spyder, even then they weren't making the women's clothes in as high a waterproofing as the men's clothes. I mean, they are now, but like stuff like that. It wasn't just at K2 where I was running into this.
And women get just as wet as men, sometimes even more.
Even more wet, can you imagine?
No.
There's a softball for all the listeners right there. But yeah, I find myself a lot of times skiing on men's skis, and sometimes we'll put the women's top sheet on them. And my newest piece of gripe with the whole women's men's product thing that I've kind of deduced it down to is I have a problem with women, it's coming around to bite us in the ass, lying about our weight. That is really what has like hindered these hard good arenas so much, is because if you look at what a woman says she weighs and a woman actually weighs, it's two totally different things. I've done a lot of research on like the average heights and weights of women in America and all of that stuff through a lot of the work I've done with designing for Spyder. And so what I found is like I basically sit exactly medium on the spectrum of the average Caucasian woman in America in terms of like weight and height and proportions and all that. And I had this thing, we were in Germany last year, and one of the K2 reps was giving me grief because I want the men's boots because I want a 130 flex and da-da-da-da. And he's like, why do you need a 130 flex? Like, what do you weigh? 120? And I just stood up. I was like, I weigh 165 right now. What do you weigh? Like, I am the same size as you. Yes, I do need a 130 flex boot. That kind of thing. Like, women write down, oh, I weigh 130. It's like, no, you don't. I mean, yeah, maybe some do. But like, just in the same way that not all men are 6'5", not all women are 5'2" and $120. Most of us are somewhere around 150, And I think that that's something that needs to be understood to change. Because there's also a lot of, not all men are 210. Like, there's a lot of dudes out there that run like 160,
Yeah.
And so I think that that's my newest angle, if you will, about kind of fighting the fight of like, no, like women need stiff, long performing skis and stiff boots. And yes, women can come in smaller shapes, but they also come in a pretty average, like same as a lot of dude shapes, And that, of course, is different when, like, sure, maybe I'm a little stronger than the average woman or maybe more powerful skier. But one of my, like, probably many gripes that I have and just trying to figure out how to make good product for all the women out there like me, whether they're as good a skier as me or not. There's a lot of good athletes out there. And part of the problem is those women are buying men's skis because their boyfriends, their husbands, the shop guy, like, oh, you're too good a skier for women's skis, and so they buy men's skis. So then the bean counters at all these brands who are actually like making a lot of these like calls of where this money goes, and they're saying like, oh, well, these stiff, long, wide women's skis don't sell. And it's like, well, that female skier is buying a men's ski and you just don't know it because it looks like a men's sale, not a woman's sale, And it's like this never ending circle. But yeah, my new gripe is like, women, don't lie about your weight. Own it. Like, whatever. It's sick, Lindsey Vonn weighs like 189, That's why she's so fast.
It makes total sense. Skis know weight. They don't know height. And you're saying women lie about weight. And therefore, that's going to create some problems with the engineers because they're engineers and they think on a linear level. They're not even going to factor in the lying. They're just going to see the data. And that's what's going to happen. So that's one part of product development. We've talked a little bit about sponsors. And who else are your sponsors? So you've got K2, you've got Spyder. Who else do you have paying you?
Scott Sports. I wear their helmet, goggles, and packs, and gloves, and poles.
Do they give you a bike too?
Okay, so I was able to sniggle a really good deal.
You were able to what?
I was sniggle, like snaggle?
Okay.
Sniggle?
I don't know. I've never heard that term before, but sure.
I'm queen of making up my own words.
Okay, yeah. So you were able to sniggle a bike.
a demo bike. I was able to get a demo bike, but they don't technically give me a bike. I think maybe in like a different time I could get a bike, but bikes are worth more than gold right now.
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
And then I also am sponsored by Sierra Nevada Brewing.
Nice.
So still drinking that beer, making you proud, hopefully.
Nah, you'd make me proud if it was 10 Barrel, but Sierra Nevada's a good second place for me.
Yep, there's a lot of craft beer in the ski industry at this point. I actually had an offer from 10 Barrel when I accepted my Sierra Nevada deal, so I was almost a fellow teammate.
Speaking about almost being a fellow teammate, we were both sponsored by Stanley. They had to make some decisions, and they dropped you.
Yep, dropped like it wasn't hot, you know?
Well, they kept me, and I don't want to
Lucky
rub that
for
in your
you.
face at all by any means, because most people would drop me first in a heartbeat, but I was able to sniggle my way into Stanley, and that worked really, really well. I just felt like throwing that out there just because I'm an asshole. Sorry.
Oh, I like it. Rub it in. At least I have all this like really sweet Stanley stuff that will last forever because it's made to last forever. So at least I got that out of the deal.
Nice.
But I think we've seen it all. The brands like come in, they want to do this athlete thing. Then they try to do like the influencer thing. And then, you know, it's just flip flops back and forth. So
It all has to do with marketing people, I feel like. I feel like if the right people were in place, you would still be in a lot of places that you aren't. Or if there were other people in different places, you would be elsewhere. It's a relationship game as well as a sponsor game. It depends on relationships too.
yeah. And it all just kind of comes and goes, you know, like I feel lucky to have some of these partnerships like Spider and K2 that have been really long running. And Scott now, I've been on Scott for almost 5 years, you know, and with Sierra for a few years. And I'm also sponsored by Squaw Valley,
Oh, nice.
soon to be renamed. Yeah, I'm one of their athletes too.
Do they ask you input on the renaming process?
Yeah, they do. I have a very, very nifty NDA that I've signed, and I've been able to be part of a bunch of conversations and brainstorming groups. And at this time of recording, I do not know the actual name, but I know it's coming soon, and it's been pretty cool. They've involved not just the athletes, but like a lot of community members from all different backgrounds and ages and everything. And so I think they've been trying to set about a tough task really well.
Yeah, well, they don't want to have to rebrand again. It is a very expensive process all across the board to make this happen. But they're doing what is right, and that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So my last thing about money, and I'm not going to dive too deep, although I do with everybody, and you probably know that, but are you able to make six figures being a pro skier?
Nope, I'm not making six figures yet. I remember laughing at someone one time when they said they wanted to make six figures as a pro skier, and I was like, that's never possible. But I will say I'm making triple what I ever thought possible as a professional skier, and I'm at a place where I don't need a second job. I still do a lot of other things related to skiing that kind of help foot that bill. Like I had my podcast. You know, I'm always doing something, but at this point, and for the last 5 years now, I have not had to have a second job, which I personally think is crazy. Like I work super hard for it, and it's crazy how much time I spend like now in the summer, like still working on my ski career. Like a lot of my ski career is emails and proposals and pitch decks and post-production and blah, blah, blah. But it still basically blows my mind that like I actually make a living, a good living. Like, I'm not driving a Tesla or anything, but like I'm comfortable. I get to go surfing. Like I have a bougie dog, but you know.
And the beautiful thing is that you said yet. It's like I asked if you were making six figures. I'm not making six figures yet. And if you're saying it like that, it's like that's your goal. And knowing you and being a goal crusher, you're going to make that happen at some point. With who? Who knows? But that's the beauty of your life as these things evolve and there'll be other brands coming to you. And what we're going to talk about now is not the beauty of your life, probably the worst part of your life. It's, I think, December 2014-ish, probably the heaviest moment of your career. You're in Utah, probably, I'm guessing, for the Powder Awards at first. I was hosting them. You were interviewing people for the red carpet. And you then go and shoot some photos, I'm guessing. And you're shooting with Adam Clark. You're going to shoot at the resort. You're at Alta, I guess. And Adam's like, hey, let's go get some golden hour light. We'll step out of the resort. But Adam doesn't have any of his avalanche gear, which is batshit crazy to me because he's like a super pro photographer. That's mistake number one. And it's kind of like if you don't have your gear, don't leave the ski area. But you guys aren't thinking about risk at that point. Do you have any thoughts about like, hey, Adam, maybe we shouldn't go out there because you're not prepared, or are you just excited to be shooting with Adam Clark?
Well, that was a crazy day for sure. Definitely changed my life and I think my complete trajectory as a skier that day. But it was actually only my third time ever going in like, quote, the backcountry. And I was about 2 weeks out of ever taking my first level 1 class. And it was my first time meeting or shooting with Adam Clark. I had met him the night before. at the Powder Awards, and he was like, come shoot. And I was like, oh my God, yes, And the experience of that day, I'd been shooting with Liam Duran earlier that morning and actually got a cover with Liam earlier that morning inbounds at Alta.
Nice.
And so it was in the afternoon. I met up with Adam and another skier. And they're like, let's go out to this like photo zone. Like it's where everybody gets their covers. And I was like, okay. And it was interesting because, I mean, if anyone's curious, I wrote this story called The Blind Spot on my personal blog, which is still on amieski.com. And it really goes through what you learn in your first, avalanche course about the heuristic traps and how I've never thought of myself as a reckless or stupid person, ever. But in the heat of the moment, with all the adrenaline and the endorphins and all that stuff, I literally made all the textbook mistakes. I had an expert halo with Adam being a local and this other skier being a local, and I wasn't checking those boxes. And we did talk about it, but we didn't really like make decisions. And like, I wasn't going to go out there without my gear. I had a beacon, shovel probe, and thankfully an airbag.
Yep.
But yeah, nobody else in my crew had a beacon or any gear. And we were going out to shoot a photo, and I dropped in first, and the whole slope released, and it was above a really deep terrain trap. It was a considerable hazard day. It was early season, so it ripped 2.5 feet to the ground. I was buried 3 feet under, and thankfully there was some strangers to me standing across the way, and what they were actually doing was documenting avalanche activity on the slope adjacent to us, which we couldn't see from the top, but I mean, from their perspective, we looked like class A idiots.
Yep.
They even say in the video, they're like, get ready to perform a rescue. And they did. These strangers came down, and Adam also came down, and he actually pulled a probe out of one of the other guys' packs and hit me before anyone locked onto a beacon signal. So, I was fully out of there in less than 5 minutes. But it was a crazy changing experience. And it was really eye-opening to have something like that happen. Like I said, my third time ever going in the backcountry, and how that's affected my perspective has been really interesting. And I was actually in, it was kind of a double-edged sword, but 2 months after that, I was in a slide inbounds at Crystal Mountain where I wasn't buried, but I pulled my airbag and blew my knee. And I think it was the combination of those two things together, where in one situation, I did everything wrong. And in the next situation, I did everything right. It was very affecting, and I struggled a lot and still do to a degree with that kind of thing. And I went through rigorous trauma counseling. I did rapid eye movement trauma counseling therapy. And, I think at this point I've gotten to the place where like, it was like a couple years ago that it finally like skiing felt like fun again. Like it kind of took a while. I think if I weren't so stubborn, I probably would have quit, but I think like letting fear beat me sounds horrible, but like, I also hate this saying our community has of like, oh, are you over that? Have you like overcome that fear? And like where I'm at now is that no, I'm not over it, but it's changed me. And now I'm in the phase where I'm like accepting that those experiences probably changed the athlete trajectory I was on and the kind of athlete I was going to become, and my propensity to risk and my understanding of consequences. And part of me misses that naivete and that crazy streak that maybe was taken away in those experiences. But I think it's about now I have this like relationship with my fear and this understanding, and I'm like moving forward hand in hand with my fear, like growing from those experiences still to this day, like, and I think that it wasn't this year, it was last year. Someone asked me, they're like, what was the biggest accomplishment of your ski season? And I was like, this is going to sound really weird, but 2 winters ago, I was like, this is the first winter where I was able to eat breakfast on like a big film or shoot day where I was going to be going to the backcountry. Because I was like still dealing with that much anxiety where like I couldn't eat and fuel properly if I knew I was going to be in the backcountry and dealing with avalanche hazard. Like it was still that heavy for me 4 or 5 years later. And I've definitely still keep growing every year, I think getting into sledding has been like a cool new phase of getting deeper into the backcountry and getting more confident with just learning to trust myself again. I think that's really what it was. Like I lost trust in myself in those experiences, and it's been a really long road to learning to trust myself again, at least like I used to.
Well, in a crazy roundabout way that I could totally be wrong about. You go through that slide, the first one, and then you come out on the internet, and while it could be super embarrassing to say all the mistakes you made and pretty much tell the cautionary tale for people, you do that and you share it with people. And the next thing you know, it's like any question of you being a ski model or anything is gone. You're a legitimate backcountry skier at that point, and the ski model thing's in the rearview mirror at that point. Did it ever feel that way, or is that just me thinking dumb?
I don't think it felt that way to me at the time. I can see how it's kind of bizarre that being a total idiot somehow legitimized me or something. But I think it was the way I approached it was really different for the time. There's a lot of victim shaming and a lot of embarrassment and shame around these avalanche accidents, and there especially was back then. And I was like, to me, it was like my healing process to share the story and get it off my chest. And there were so many people saying like so much Monday morning quarterbacking and I would never, and they're an idiot and da-da-da. But like when I put a narrative to what happened, I think it was easy for people to see how I humanized the story. Like those incident reports you read on Avalanche Forecast Center, they're not humanized. You know, you think, oh, I'm never going to be that dumb until you are. And so I think that to me, it was just like what I had to do. And it ended up like, I think, encouraging a lot of other people to open up about avalanche accidents. And I think you learn a lot more from these humanized stories than like just reading some incident report in an avalanche course and being like, oh, well, I'm not going to be idiots like them. And maybe it legitimized me some way, but like more in like a way that I would carry myself through something like that more than even anything that had to do with my skill or my backcountry skill, because obviously I was kind of whiffing it at that point.
I think it kind of just made it feel like that's where you ski and yeah, this happened and you're going to own it. And nobody was owning it at that point.
I mean, I didn't let it stop me either. I think that, like I said, if you ask my dad or Todd or anybody, I'm a fairly stubborn person. And I think for me to continue to pursue skiing in the backcountry at a high level when my introduction to skiing in the backcountry was like almost dying, I guess that serves a little bit of legitimacy. Like, oh, she must really want this.
Yeah.
You know, like this isn't going to stop her kind of thing, which I've never thought of it that way. So interesting.
Eventually you get your mojo back. And I think the pinnacle of a lot of the things that you've done, I'm sure there's a lot of other things you're proud of, but you've been in like 5 Warren Miller movies. And when I look at Warren Miller, it's a certain kind of film. I mean, you're still going to ski gnarly terrain. You're going to go to Alaska. You're going to have an amazing trip. It's going to be 5-star, way better than a lot of the other crews that are going out there. Do you ever have any desire to film with the hardcore ski film companies out there, or have you found your home with Warren Miller?
Both. I've always wanted to film with Warren Miller, and it's been awesome to do so. And I think that Warren Miller does have a different style, maybe a softer reputation, but the fact of the matter is they're a huge company, and the amount of eyeballs that are on the screen for a Warren Miller movie are completely incomparable to any other film
for sure
that's in the ski industry. And so I think that for me, seeing that as an asset too, and looking at it as a business decision more than like a soul decision, when I would kind of push for Warren Miller with my sponsors. And I think that's, you know, I get treated really well by Warren Miller and they operate like a business, and it's less of like a cool guy who's who thing that I think a lot of the ski movies definitely were. But that being said, I have definitely wanted to always film with TGR, MSP, or one of the more core film groups. It's just I've taken away putting any sort of like and it's been hard. On my good days, I don't always feel this way, but I don't want to put my own personal success on those kind of relationships, because the fact of the matter is as much as, you know, Warren Miller, it's about your sponsor commitments and obligations, and that's how you get in the films. It's the same way with TGR and MSP. They just hide it a little better. And so there's so many things going on with the decisions that lead to who's in the movie that are really hard for me to affect.
Yeah.
I've kind of let it go, you know. I would love to have it happen, and I think what I've done to kind of counter is with the Warren Miller, you know, they put your shots in the movie and their kind of style is a lot of quick shots, you know, really quick takes, but then you get all your footage. And so most years I've gone and I've made my own like edit out of the footage, and I think that's been helpful. And then the last 2 years I just have decided to completely go on my own and do my own independent project, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's been really fun. I like producing things, and I know I'm a good producer as well, so it's fun to like use that skill. And, you know, if the opportunity presents to work with TGR MSP, like I'm all on board. I still love working with Warren Miller. I would love to be in as many films as possible with them, you know, and I think that it's one of those things where I have had times, and if I'm having like a bad day, sometimes I'm still wrapped up in this of like, oh, I'm not good enough for those movies, or these people don't take me seriously enough, or don't think I'm core enough. But it's not that. It's really so much more about like your sponsor partnerships, what's working out. It's not just your actual sponsor. It's how many combined sponsors you have that's going to work for that film or whatever. And my approach now is I really would like to be in a marquee film at least every year, just because I think being on tour is really valuable for my brands and stuff like that. But I'm trying to find my passion projects on my own and just make them happen on my own. That's been my whole approach to skiing. Like, I've never been sitting around waiting for anyone to call, because the thing is they don't call. Like, no one's calling and inviting me to anything or anywhere. Like, it all happens. Like, I start it, I make it happen for myself, and then that's how I end up in a place. Like, to get into Warren Miller, I was talking to all my sponsors. I would send Josh, the producer, an email like once a month for like 5 years. Like, I never ever sit around and wait for the phone to ring, because in my experience, the phone has never rung.
Right. Yeah. What you're just saying right there is something that every younger skier should take to heart, is that the phone doesn't ring. I mean, yeah, if you're a Candide level talent, you're going to have team managers knocking down your door, but there aren't many people like that. And if you want to be found, you have to make yourself be found. And you definitely did that. And you've created every opportunity that you've had. But where you say Warren Miller's pay to play and TGR and MSP, and everybody is, I mean, sure, there's special circumstances for some people sometimes, but they really don't happen. And it's not going to happen with you. They're not going to be like, hey, we're going to put her in the movie for free. But they could, because if K2 were to stop paying Warren Miller, would Warren Miller put you back in the movie? Because you've kind of positioned yourself where you're almost the female complement to Johnny Mosley, where Johnny's always on the mic and talking a lot of stuff in Warren Miller. But you seem to have taken into that mix with the podcast, and I'm sure you've got your tentacles in a bunch of other Warren Miller things. Is it one of those things where you're going to have a future with Warren Miller just because of all the things you're able to do?
I certainly hope so. This year I was able, K2 did move away from Warren Miller for a little bit here, and so I was able to be in the film via a squaw segment. And there's always segments in the Warren Miller movie that are attached to maybe more like location sponsors or something like that than like an actual hard goods sponsor. And I hope so. I hope that's true. I hope maybe someday there'll be like a female, narrator. Maybe Johnny and I could co-narrate or something. But I just have kept that relationship in a really good standing. I'm really professional and good to work with, and so is Warren Miller. And I mean, I also have really good relationship with TGR and work with them on a lot of other things other than their feature film. And so I think that I would really hope to continue to be with Warren Miller regardless of where things shake out with sponsors. But at the end of the day, it takes money to make these films, and I know that, they know that, and as much as I could think like, oh, I'm special and unique to you, I mean, I think that's where you get yourself into trouble by believing that too much, like you got to believe in yourself, but you also need to not be delusional,
Everyone's replaceable.
Kinda, I mean, it's kind of sucks to say it that way, but it's basically true, like I want to believe in myself and know that I'm special and unique and have this unique value I can add to these situations, but you have to be realistic, and I think that's like my kind of self-preservation tactic a little bit. For time being, I hope to continue to work with Warren Miller, because like I said, they're a great company. They run a very professional show. Had the best trips of my life ever have been with Warren Miller. I'm sure I'll never travel like that again without them. But yeah, I think that I'm open to other opportunities. And like I said, in the meantime, making my own things happen, the things I love and I believe in, making those happen on the side,
Yeah. Well, at this point in the show, I have a segment that I like to call Inappropriate Questions. And I get someone that to ask 3 questions. They can be anything. And I was going to get your boyfriend, Todd, to ask the questions. But then I realized I didn't want him to ask any questions that could jeopardize him getting laid. So I went to someone else who knows a little bit about that subject. I got a very pregnant Alyssa Clark, whose married name is a really tough one for me to spit out of my mouth, but I'll try. Her name is Alyssa Seaman. And she's one of your former K2 team managers, and she's going to ask the questions. Are you ready for question number 1 from Alyssa?
I can't wait.
All right, here we go.
Would you rather sip gin with Michael Bolton or shoot tequila with Beyonce?
Oh, shit. She knows me so well. Well, this one's actually easy. Sip gin with Michael Bolton. And I don't even like gin. Gin is my least favorite cocktail. I've actually gotten into Negronis recently, but I am so obsessed with Michael Bolton. Plus, he's going to die sooner than Beyonce. So, although maybe not. He's like so full of Botox. I actually saw him in Reno recently. I convinced like 20 of my friends to go to a Michael Bolton concert in Reno.
Amazing.
And it was like the best night of my life. I rushed the stage with like 5 other old women, and I actually touched Michael Bolton's hand, and we made eye contact 3 times. So I'm going to have to go gin with Michael Bolton because I love that man.
Well, I will send you a picture later on today of me in my 90s Michael Bolton half shirt, which is made as a half shirt. I didn't cut it. It was actually produced like that, and I still have it and wear it every once in a while.
Well, when you're ready to retire that shirt, if you don't send it to me, I will hunt you down. But I think I've seen that shirt. You wore it at a PMS because Chris Bencheller was also wearing a Michael Bolton shirt that night. And I was just like, oh, how do I not have a Michael Bolton shirt?
Yeah, 2 Michael Bolton shirts, 1 girl. Weird. Let's go with question number 2.
Amie, would you rather be on the cover of Powder Magazine, rest in peace, and win the Best Female Performance Award at Powder Awards, or be on a season of Dancing with the Stars?
Oh my God, that's like top 3 dreams combined. My actual like side dream has always been to become like some sort of like G-level celebrity and like somehow make it on Dancing with the Stars and hide my background as like a semi-professional ballroom dancer and win. But it's also just about like the fringe costumes. I want to wear the fringe costumes. They spray tan on your abs. And America always votes for fringe. Always. It's like a for sure thing. So let's see here. I mean, one's more life-changing, right? Like, so if I'm on the cover of Powder and win Best Female, that's good for me as a skier. But if I win Dancing with the Stars, I mean, sky's the limit there, right?
Yeah, with Powder, you're going to make 10 more grand the next year, and you're going to have that cover framed on your wall if they send it to you. And Dancing with the Stars, yeah, the whole world is like your opportunity at that point because it's so big.
I think I'm going to go with Dancing with the Stars because if this would you rather thing is like a fantasy thing, like that's maybe in fantasy realm. And I'm still standing by that Powder's coming back and I'm going to get my cover. I'm going to get my award. Like, just you wait. I'm not old yet. It's coming. So we'll get that first and then Dancing with the Stars later.
All right. There we go. You're gonna your final question from Alyssa.
Amie, I don't think you have ever had an agent. You've always been your own agent. So what has been the most difficult in terms of contract negotiations and whatnot? What has been the most difficult question or information you've had to digest being front end of that conversation rather than having a middleman?
I've had stints with agents, but I've never really had an agent, which has been something I've always wanted because it's really hard to go to bat for yourself in these situations. And I think the hardest, maybe like rubber hitting the road moment with that actually came last year at the beginning of the pandemic when things were really uncertain. And my Spider contract was actually up April 1st, 2020, which is basically the worst time in the world to renegotiate a contract. And Spider is by far my title sponsor and supports the majority of, that's how I live, and I had to wait, I think it was like 6 months before re-signing. And thankfully I have a really good relationship with the people at Spider. And I really did trust them that contract was going to come back. But I did have to take a hit. And when I did try to negotiate, they're like, look, every single person on our payroll took a huge hit. Like, we're sorry. And I think that like dealing with that, and because also at that same time, one of my other sponsors just broke contract and stopped paying me. And some of my other sponsors were saying like, we don't know, we think it's going to be okay. And so in that time, like not really understanding my rights, but also knowing that these companies know that I don't really make enough money to sue them.
Right.
So like these contracts kind of like you realize it's like, well, I'm basically just signing nothing kind of. I think that those were the times where I was just like, man, I feel pretty over my head. And it certainly feels like this whole thing could just vaporize right now, And I think that's when I definitely wished I at least had a friend that was a lawyer or something to like understand where I was at. Because I definitely, as much as I feel like I have pretty good grip on running my career, there's times where you feel, just out to sea, totally alone. And you're like, shit, is this all gonna go away? And I think it was really hard and really scary. And I'm grateful that it all worked out. The sponsorship, the contract that just kind of ceased payments and dropped was thankfully a small one. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all those conversations are hard, and I'm pretty good about selling myself and going to bat for myself, but I definitely felt scared in that time,
Yeah, I mean, we all did,
and
and we were in the right industry, it seems like, at the end of the day, where anything outdoors, it seemed like the money came back in, but everybody was feeling that fear, and everybody had sponsors pull out, and there was so much uncertainty, but it seems like it's worked out for almost everyone.
It seems like the outdoor space is the place to be. But I also think like maybe not having an agent helped me in that like I do, for better or worse, have some really tight relationships with the people on the other side of these brands, in that I can have really frank conversations and build my own level of trust, you know?
Yeah.
And so like maybe that was helpful in that situation. You know, like kudos to the people at Spider for telling it straight and honoring their word. And, you know, maybe that's a relationship that wouldn't exist if they were just talking to my agent.
No, I think you're totally right. And that's going to do it for inappropriate questions and kind of do it for the podcast, I feel like. I mean, I feel privileged that I was able to be early on in your career just someone that was able to kind of watch you work, because when I think about hardworking skiers, I used to always say Seth Morrison was the hardest worker because he was always just so quick to email back and he'd get you anything you wanted. But he was just making sure that he was always covering his bases and making sure anybody's questions were answered and that he didn't have any obligations out there that weren't being taken care of. You're always creating something. You're always making something happen. Where he never had to make shit happen. People wanted him to do stuff. You're creating stuff and creating plans, and you've built a whole career on that. I mean, you could have had just a career where it was like a smile and an amazing turn, and you could have, you know, skied 10 years off of doing that. But that was never what was going to make you happy. It was always like, hey, I'll do that. But I want this opportunity to prove myself here and to go ski these things because I am so much more than that. And while, you know, I don't know what I believed in the beginning. I just knew that we were giving you a chance and we were going to see what happened. But it all worked just exactly how you said it was going to work. And I thank you for making me look good, I guess.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. It means a lot coming from you. And I just have to ask, since you asked me, how was I as an athlete to you as a TM? Was I like annoying and hounding and pressuring, or like, what's my review card?
You are the most self-confident and believe in yourself more than anybody else. So it was one of those things where it wasn't like, oh, we have to see if Amie's going to do this. It's like, no, Amie's going to do it, and she's going to call me 10 minutes before I think about it, so I better be prepared. You kept me on my toes, and most athletes don't keep their team managers on their toes by any means. So it was a good thing, but I can't say as many people are as self-confident and have the self-belief and actualization that you have and actually make it happen. So it's pretty cool to see because I don't even do that. So it's pretty rad.
Well, we all have our moments, but I work hard to be that way. So as long as nobody thinks it comes naturally, it all takes some work. But I appreciate it, pal. And it's fun to finally be on your podcast and hopefully get to hang out with you again soon somewhere along the road.
So that was time with Amie Engerbretson, and her story is a lesson in setting your sights on something and then not taking no for an answer. And I mean, the more I think about what she did, no never meant no. While that isn't true in all situations, and guys, you should definitely take that to heart, with Amie, she didn't need to persuade people to work with her or trick them into it. She could show you everything that she was doing, everything that she had in the works, and what her plans were for the future. No skier really thinks that way, but also, no skier really has the personality and the drive of Amie. That's the podcast for this week. And now it's time for my review of the week. And this one comes from Med Students for PMT, and it's titled Great Stuff. It's a 5-star review that sounds like it comes straight out of the game of NAR, and here it goes. I can't believe you're a pro podcaster. I'm so much better than you. I love this review. It's a nod to the fun-loving but competitive nature of Squaw Valley life, and it also is pretty fitting. While this is a joke, everyone thinks they can produce a podcast that's great. And you know what? I'm sure there are a lot of people that can produce some good stuff. But like Amie Engerbretson and how she works to make shit happen, I feel like I need to do the same with my podcast. I put in the 40 plus hours a week and do everything I can to make this thing as entertaining and informative as I can for you. And I encourage other folks to start a podcast. If you are serious about starting one, I'll even help you out, give you some insight on how I created mine. And all you need to do to get that insight is email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com with some questions and I'll help you out. Med Students for PMT, who provided that review, you need to email me as well with your physical mailing address, and I will send you a limited edition Powell Movement beanie out ASAP. Anyone else who wants a beanie, all you need to do is review me. And if I read your review on the show, you win. It's that easy, and here are the steps to do it. First, hit the podcast icon on your smartphone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, click how many stars you think I deserve and write a review. It takes about a minute and it's greatly appreciated. Finally, I want to thank you for listening and ask you to support my amazing sponsors. They are the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Rollerblade, and Alpine Vans. Have a great week, everyone.